Hey guys, it's Nicole. I'm back with another video, and today's video is going to be about a book that I finished literally as of recording yesterday. But before we get into that, I wanted to say Happy New Year to those who mostly celebrate the traditional calendar New Year. We are in January. This is our first video of the year, and it's also our first book video of the year, and this is a really good one for me to talk about, so I'm very excited to talk about it today. I have briefly mentioned in previous videos that there are going to be some changes coming up in my life and that I will be sharing them with you, so look forward to that. It's probably going to be coming up in the next few months, so keep your eyes open and keep your subscriptions going. You'll get notified as soon as I let you all know what those changes are going to be. And also, if you are a subscriber or if you have just subscribed recently, thank you so much. All of you mean so much to me. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. It would mean so much and you would get notified every time I upload new videos. So please subscribe. It costs you absolutely nothing. And if you do enjoy this video, please like, comment, and share. I want to hear from you guys. Please comment below if you know anyone that might enjoy my videos, that likes books, likes any kind of content to do with books. Please share this video with them. But that all being said, let's go ahead and get into the book we're going to be talking about today. So today's book, I finished technically last year in 2025. I literally finished it on New Year's Eve. I was really down to the wire on that one. But I did finish it and I cannot wait to talk about this. This is one of my new favorite books. This is the version that I have. Today we're going to be talking about Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre. And if you saw my other video where I ranked all the books I read in 2025, this was on there because technically I finished it in 2025. This ranked number 3 for me out of the 40 books I read in 2025. And that says a lot because I read a lot of books and a lot of them were really, really good. And this was number 3. And it's just so good. So, if you haven't seen any of my other videos, I have already read Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte, who is Charlotte Bronte's sister. This is a classic along with Wuthering Heights. Like, they're both classics, and that's why I wanted to read this. But another reason I wanted to read it was because after reading Wuthering Heights and reading a little bit about Emily Bronte and reading about their family and how Emily and Charlotte and Anne, one of their other sisters, all became writers and all wrote novels, I was like, well, I kind of want to read at least one novel for now of all of the sisters and like talk about their different writing styles and see what kind of different stories they tell. So that was really the main reason I wanted to pick up this book and read it. I ordered this version just because I love the cover so much. Like, it is a complete and unabridged version, so this is like as original as it gets, like, these days, without being an original. And it is just so pretty, so that's why I wanted this one. It's a little thick. It did take me a minute to read. That's why I finished it right at the cusp, right at New Year's Eve. I am planning to read Charlotte Bronte's other books at another time, but because I kind of wanted to read all of the sisters' books, so next I'll be reading Anne Bronte's book if I can find it. And this is probably like Charlotte Bronte's most famous novel. I don't know how many other novels she wrote. They kind of list a few of them in here, but this is definitely her most famous. Jane Eyre is, I've heard of it, like, even though I hadn't read it or knew what it was about in any context, I had heard of it like years ago. So this is a classic, and I have been getting into classics lately, so it's really good. It's really good. I'm really glad I read this. There's not really a huge, like, blurb to read, like, what this book is about. On the back of this version, it does say, Bronte's romantic masterpiece portrays the passion of Jane Eyre and the brooding Mr. Rochester. Now, to me, that doesn't feel like a solid blurb because to me, it doesn't really describe what the book is actually about, in my opinion. This is what I took from the book. But that is kind of what goes on. That's like the whole plot line throughout the book. Like that's like the anchoring thing that we come back to at the end, like their romance. So that is like the thing. But like to me, the book is about so much more than that. Since there's not really a blurb to kind of read from, I'm going to very generally describe what Jane Eyre is about in case anyone doesn't know. So Jane Eyre is about the character named Jane Eyre. And it starts off in her early life, I want to say when she's like 9 or 10 years old. And we start there because there's a lot of things that happen to her in that period of her life that dictate how she handles and behaves in situations later on, especially in the book. The other thing that's very cool about this is that it is from Jane Eyre's perspective, but it's from her perspective from her future self. So because literally, like when you open the book here, what you see is like the title, like the longer title in the book itself. It says Charlotte Bronte, Jane Eyre, an autobiography. So the book is essentially an autobiography by the character Jane Eyre. And she's telling her story, starting at what she considers kind of the beginning of her life, or at least like where things started that really affected how she behaved in situations later on in her life. And, you know, so we meet her there, and then we follow her. You know, there are points where we skip ahead a few years because, again, she's really going through, like, to her, what are, like, the big events of her life. So we skip through several years at some points. And we do get to see the romance between Jane Eyre and Mr. Rochester. That is very true. However, to me, the novel Jane Eyre, an autobiography, really is just about that. Like, it's literally just about Jane Eyre and what she goes through in her life to get her to what she considers the most amazing place to be in her as her future self, which there is a conclusion at the end of the book, like this is where she ended up, like this. They call it a conclusion instead of an epilogue because really, like, she's just summing up as the character, like, this is what's going on present day, and that's how the book ends. And that's why, to me, the back, it's like not super accurate to just say it's a romance between her and Mr. Rochester. It's really about Jane Eyre herself, especially because we get her narrative the whole time. We don't ever really get Mr. Rochester's narrative, and he's not part of the book the entire time, especially in the beginning and even parts in the middle. And so the romance is a really big part of the book, and it is just so nice. It's so beautiful. But that's not, to me, mainly what the book is about. To me, mainly the book is about a woman who she was an orphan and raised by an aunt who hated her and cousins who tormented her, and went to a school, a boarding school that was horrible. And there's something a little bit based in reality from that specific part of the book that I learned. And the found family and other family that she finds as she goes through life, making decisions based on her principles, you know, like she doesn't have a lot of family to just like help her establish a job or help her find someone to marry, because Jane Eyre takes place in like the 1800s. I don't think I could pinpoint a year because it never really says. I'm going to guess somewhere in the mid 1800s, possibly later 1800s. And at that time, obviously, women's choices were very limited. This takes place in England. So like for jobs, as it goes for women in those days, it's like you could become like a teacher, like you could become a governess, which is what Jane Eyre becomes. I think there were some other ways you could like get work and like work as a woman, but usually it had to do with what family you came from or what family you were entering into if you were getting married. So, you know, for her, it's like her journey, her story of how she managed to get to where she was in the present day from the really hard, difficult, tough life that she started out in. I mainly love the book because I love her. I love Jane Eyre. She's so feminine, but also so masculine, and like to me she kind of embodies both. She's like, I'm not this like gorgeous woman, and at the same time like she does embody like, you know, a lot of feminine traits that even if I couldn't see her face, I'm like, she's beautiful. Like, even though she describes herself as very plain or very, you know, just like whatever, like looks aren't that important to her, I picture her as like a pretty girl. Like, most of the book takes place when she's 18 years old. So I picture her as a very pretty girl because of the way she holds herself as this very feminine woman. But at the same time, she holds, at least especially for the time, very masculine attributes where she's very argumentative. She doesn't take things at face value. She's so stubborn. She goes, well, this is my principle. I'm not giving in. I don't care what you're saying. I don't care who you are. I'm not giving in. I am going by my principles. What I say goes. I don't care. And for her at that time, what was so really strong about that is, again, like I said, she didn't have a fallback. She didn't have a family home to run home to if she rubbed someone the wrong way and lost a job, or was kicked out of somewhere, or lost out on a relationship for that reason. And so to me, it just really made her such an incredibly complex and interesting character, for her to be so determined and stubborn and immovable, just so focused on doing what she believed was right. Most of the time for her, because a lot of the time she wasn't really making decisions for other people, you know, because she's 18, she's young, she's a kid, she's not making a lot of decisions for other people, but for herself, she's making a ton of decisions, and she's making those decisions based on principles that she kind of picked up from a lot of the other characters that she meets in the book, and how she interprets those principles to bring meaning to her life, but also to keep her going into a life that will bring her peace and content and joy, but also adventure and meaning, you know? So I just really, really found it so fascinating that this incredibly young character is just so steadfast in her convictions. Like, I remember being 18, and I think I was, you know, pretty determined, pretty stubborn about certain things, but reading the decisions that she made for herself versus remembering the decisions I made for myself at her age, I'm just like, it's so hard to tell. Is this realistic? I am just comparing it to my own experience, because I look back on decisions I made when I was 18 and go, that wasn't a great decision. Could have been worse, but definitely could have been better. And then here she is, this really intriguing character that's like, I'm choosing this because I'm going to sit here and I'm going to think about it, and I'm going to weigh the pros and the cons. I'm going to weigh what kind of consequences might come of whatever decision I make. And that's how I'm going to make my decision. And I think that that's such a fascinating attribute to have as a character, especially as a teenager, because when I was 18, a lot of my decisions came from impulse, you know, and when you're a teenager, that's a lot of where your decision making comes from. And that's why teenagers shouldn't be able to make huge decisions. You know, you're basically like a child brain in an adult body-ish almost, where your brain is still developing. You're not quite there yet and haven't been able to experience enough consequences in life, or really what it means to be able to make such a huge decision. And I think that's why she starts out her autobiography when she was like 9 or 10, because she ended up making certain decisions when she was that young that made her who she was, who she became. So yeah, I know I kind of went on a long time about that, but I think that's really why I loved the book so much, because the romance was so fun, so good. But for me, it's reading a book from the perspective of character that's just so interesting. It's like, I can't believe I guess I can believe because reading her experiences. It's just so fun to read and so interesting and just fulfilling to read a book with a character that gives you this perspective of someone who doesn't really know what they're doing in life, but knows how to get where they're going, knows how they react and how they need to make decisions. And that was just really cool. And I think that's why I just absolutely fell in love with this book. Honestly, if the two books that I read last year, like I hadn't read last year that went above this in my rank, like books 1 and 2 that were my favorite, if I hadn't read those last year, Jane Eyre would have been at my top. This book would have been at the top of my list, my most favorite book I read last year. It was just, it was like reading this book was kind of like coming home and reading something nostalgic, almost for something that I've never experienced in my life, but also like going on an adventure with her. And that's what a book is really good when every time you sit in to read a chapter, you have no idea where it's going to go, but you're so excited to find out where it's going to go. Like, you're not scared. I mean, there was one time I was scared. I was like, oh God, I'm nervous she's going to mess something up, but she didn't. It was fine. But you're just more excited to see where it's going to go. And to me, that's the marker of a true good book. So those are my general thoughts about Jane Eyre. I am going to read, there's a preface that's just a couple pages, and then there is a note to the 3rd edition, which I'm not sure which edition this is, and then there's also a publisher's note. Kind of gives a little bit of a context of the times that this book was published in and who it was written by, and also because if you haven't watched my other video about Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights, you should, especially if you enjoyed this video. I talk about a little bit more in length how the Bronte sisters, when they had their books first published, they had them first published under pseudonyms, and they all did it under pseudonyms that had the same initial of their first names. Like, so Emily Bronte's book was released under, I think it was Ellis Bell, or it started with an E, basically. And then Charlotte Bronte, she released her novels, like this one and maybe a few others, under the name of Currer Bell, you know? So it was kind of a little bit of, yeah, I was right, it is Ellis, yeah. And then Anne Bronte released her novel under the pseudonym Acton Bell, also starting with an A like Anne. And that's kind of giving the context, and then of when they re-released it with the author's actual names. Yeah, I'm not going to read the preface because that's just a little bit of like context if you want it. I'm going to read the first page of the first chapter just to give a little bit of context and what the book will sound like if you're interested in reading it. So all it says is at the top, it says chapter 1, and this is just this edition. Like I said, there's so many versions you can buy of Jane Eyre. This is one I have. Chapter 1. There was no possibility of taking a walk that day. We had been wandering, indeed, in the leafless shrubbery an hour in the morning, but since dinner, Mrs. Reed, when there was no company, dined early. The cold winter wind had brought with it clouds so somber and a rain so penetrating that further outdoor exercise was now out of the question. I was glad of it. I never liked long walks, especially on chilly afternoons. Dreadful to me was the coming home in the raw twilight, with nipped fingers and toes, and a heart saddened by the chidings of Bessie, the nurse, and humbled by the consciousness of my physical inferiority to Eliza, John, and Georgiana Reed. The said Eliza, John, and Georgiana were now clustered round their mamma in the drawing-room. She lay reclined on a sofa by the fireside, and with her darlings about her, for the time neither quarreling nor crying, looked perfectly happy. Me she had dispensed from the group, saying she regretted to be under the necessity of keeping me at a distance, but that until she heard from Bessie, and could discover by her own observation that I was endeavoring in good earnest to acquire a more sociable and childlike disposition, a more attractive and sprightly manner, something lighter, franker, more natural, as it were, She really must exclude me from privileges intended for only contented, happy little children. And that's the first page. If you'll notice, that last sentence, paragraph that I just read, basically takes up the entire half of the last paragraph. And that is a very common theme in this book. What I found interesting about that is there's so many run-on sentences, and I guess some of them you can kind of call run-on, some of them just like really long sentences with a lot of context, a lot of like describing something but then going except this but all in one sentence, is like, is that the way Charlotte Bronte wrote? Or is she writing like that to portray that that's the way Jane Eyre writes? Because remember, this book is essentially Jane Eyre, an autobiography. Jane Eyre, the character, essentially is writing this book. This is her autobiography. So I was wondering the entire time I'm reading this, is Charlotte Bronte writing this novel and writing it in her style, and she's the one that's making these very long sentences? Or is she writing that on purpose because in her mind, that's how Jane Eyre would write, because she has all of these run-on thoughts, and that's why it all comes in? Because other than what, you know, Mrs. Reed actually ended up saying, a lot of the sentence was like extra and like didn't need to be there. It was like just a lot of context that if you're thinking and this is like your thought process and you're writing down in your journal, like that's what would come out. And so I couldn't help wondering which it was, which made it fun for me. I'm very curious. It's another reason I want to read more of Charlotte Bronte's books, because I want to see if that's also the case in her other novels. So I thought that was a very cool little thing. But that is what the book sounds like. Like I said, it was like written in the 1850s, so you can tell we don't really speak that way anymore. But yeah, the first page really does kind of describe how her life at her aunt's mercy was, and how mistreated she was. I am going to go into some things that are definitely kind of spoiler like, especially if you haven't read it at all. So if you don't want any spoilers, now is the time to close out the video. So if you are leaving, thank you so much for watching. But let's go ahead and get into some spoilers. There are some things that I really liked that I do want to touch on briefly before I end this video. What was interesting to me, and I'm always very stubborn on this, but Jane Eyre and Mr. Rochester have a 20-year age difference. Jane Eyre is 18 when she meets Mr. Rochester. And Mr. Rochester is like almost 40, like I'd guess 39, because she says almost 40, so I'm gonna guess 38 or 39. Now, normally, right, even when talking about relationships of the past, normally I'm like, wrong, grooming, not okay, oh my god, ew, no, ugh. And I was a little bit wary at first, definitely, right? Because, you know, even back then, just because it was normal doesn't mean it was okay for grown adult men, almost 40 or in their 40s, to take teenage girls and go, you're gonna be my wife, and yeah, I get to dictate everything you do. I think that no matter what the time was, I don't think that was okay. Just because it was normal doesn't mean it was okay. However, the way this book goes and allows Jane to leave Mr. Rochester and come back and explore more of her world and her options and her possibilities, I'm actually happy with their romance at the end of the book, which is surprising. I know. I didn't think I would be either. I'm reading this book going, I don't know what to feel, because their flirting is so cute, you know, when they first actually start flirting, you know, because she becomes the governess at his household. He took on a little girl who needed to be taught, like she wasn't sent away to school yet, and it wasn't his actual daughter. It was just someone that he promised he would take in. Long story. And she becomes the governess for this child, and that's how they meet. And it's so cute when they start flirting. And I was like, I don't know what to think here, because he's so much older than her. And it's not even that he's so much older than her, because age differences to me, like, even in these days, like, if you're like 30 something and then you meet someone 50 something and you decide like you're in love, you get married, I'm happy for you. The problem is when one of the people of the couple is under like 25 or so. Like, that's when I find it to be a problem and icky. So that's why I found it like, I'm conflicted here, because he is incredibly kind. You know, he treats her and other women and other people like people. He's like, sure, women technically had their place in society back then, but he was kind and respectable to the people because he just saw them as people doing their jobs. You know, he was like, oh, Jane, like, you're young, but you are a very good governess. You're very good at your job. And he spoke to her frankly and had conversations with her, didn't talk down to her. And same thing with like the what's her name, like the house, like she wasn't like the housekeeper, maybe she was the housekeeper, Mrs. Fairfax. You know, he never spoke down to any of them. He was like, you're a person, you happen to be a woman, but you're a person that is just doing your job, and whether you're good at your job or not, like, I'm gonna pretty much treat you all the same. And so for me, I'm like, okay, well, he's not so bad. But he's 20 years older than her and she's 18. So I'm like, I don't know how to feel about this. And even now, after reading it, I'm still like, I'm happy that they got to, this is a spoiler, they get together at the end. But it's after going through a lot for Jane. She almost became his mistress because technically he's married, he can't get divorced. That's a long story. And she decides that is not okay with her. She will never be someone's mistress. She will not allow herself to be treated that way. And she left in the middle of the night with almost nothing. And she went through this incredible journey where she almost died at the end of it, trying to get someone to give her something, some food, some water. And then, you know, from her skills and then the kindness of others, like, she was able to get a teaching job. And then she learned she got an inheritance from an uncle of hers that died. And she became herself in the world. Like, she found herself and who she was. And the entire time, even though she was like finding herself and doing her thing and exploring and developing as a person, she was like, but I still think of him because I still love him. And I like, that's how you know she actually loved him. Because when it's like a situation where someone's being groomed, the longer someone's away, usually that's when they start to fall out of love, right? Because instead of being in such close quarters and you're like, well, I must love them because I'm around them all the time. It's like she went away and she's like, but I actually still love him and I'm so worried about him. I want to know how he's doing. I want to be there with him every day. And to me, that's why it's not a problematic relationship. And I love the way that Charlotte wrote that. This was in the 1850s and Charlotte Bronte wrote this. This is incredible to me. Like, the knowledge and intelligence and emotional awareness for just women and the relationships they have with older men if they get romantically involved is incredibly ahead of its time, but also just so smart. That's honestly, there's probably a lot more traits of this book and things that happened in it that I could go on about of why I loved this book, but I'm going to stop it there. Essentially, the way it was written was so beautiful, so smart. I loved it so much. The character Jane Eyre is one of my favorite characters of all time now. I absolutely adore her. And the romance that happens between Jane Eyre and Mr. Rochester is probably one of my favorite romances to this day. So that's all I'm going to say about Jane Eyre. If you have any other thoughts, if you've read Jane Eyre or just heard of it, let me know in the comments. I love this book so much, but that is all for this week's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let's make it a really good new year, 2026. I'm so excited to be uploading new videos and making new content, and thank you guys so much for being here. I will see you all in the next video.